Hello, I'm Nick Tyrone, neoliberal centrist dad. Thank you for joining me. This one is it was inspired by a tweet, which is rare for me these days. I don't go on Twitter/X that much, other than to post. Sometimes I will look at stuff, but I used to really go to Twitter for news, at least news updates, and I do way less of that now. It's not that I don't like X, it's that I don't think it's as informative as it once was, which is a shame. And I hope that gets corrected because I don't think any of the alternatives are anywhere close to as good. I don't even think they're anywhere close to as good as X in its current form, never mind what it was. I just think things like Blue Sky are kind of echo chambers. And if that's what you like, that's great. To each his own. To me, no thanks. And I wouldn't want a right-wing version of it either, Truth Social or whatever. I've barely flirted with those. But to me, it seems like it would just be the sort of bizarro world version of Blue Sky. Just a bunch of people agreeing with each other and everybody agreeing with each other. That's boring to me. One of the things I like about Twitter and X is the disagreements. The people coming at things from a different angle. And oftentimes that devolves into being abusive and all that sort of stuff. But oftentimes as well, you get real discussion, and that's what I'd rather have. And I'd rather have that clash of cultures. To me, I think if we're going to survive as a society, and by that I mean just Western society, I think we are going to have to be able to come together and at least have a debate about things we disagree with. I feel very, very strongly about that. This video is on something, I'm thinking it's frivolous, but I don't think it is. I actually think this is quite a big thing the more that I think about it, the more it's sort of flowing in my brain. Because I sort of had this idea, I'll go do the video, and I didn't really have that much written down. I haven't done really any prep for this. So the post it was inspired by was from Matt Goodwin. And it was a post he did about going into London, I presume from somewhere in the home counties. Does he live in Kent? I think he lives in Kent, but correct me if I'm wrong. But anyhow, even if it's Essex, it's the same basic principle. It's somewhere in the home counties, and he comes into London, and the train is overpriced, and it's packed. It's too packed with people, and there's nowhere to sit down. And then he gets into London, and it's all busy and it's loud, and the pints cost £8, and the tubes this, that, and the other. All this stuff basically. Of a type of posting and article and sort of, it's almost like a meme on the right in Britain. This sort of isn't London a dump, and it's had a big influence, I think, on America. A lot of Americans think that London is like Islamabad or something. Sorry, just as I say that, it's so ridiculous that I had to laugh just saying it out loud. But that is genuinely, I think, where a lot of Americans think London is right now, and it's not. And what this video is really about is saying that it's not, that there's not what's happening in London right now. Not that London doesn't have problems, which I will try and get to, but the crux of this video is really why I think Matt Goodwin and people like that going on about how London's such a dump and God, London's gone downhill, is I think strategically it is bad for the overall story that they want to tell. So I'll get to that. That's the main sort of, if you like, that's the meat of this video, is why I think the right should stop going on about why London is a dump. Because London isn't, and so actually just not being honest isn't great. But even if that were not the case, I think actually it's strategically bad for the British right to keep going on about how London is a shithole. And, well, I will explain why I think that. So first of all, just to cover off the basis of London being some sort of... let's put it this way. London being significantly worse in some respect than it was, say, 25 years ago. And I have from some perspective because I have lived in London continuously for more than 25 years. And do I think London is worse than it was 25 years ago? Well, let me try and think of the ways that I think London is worse. I think that Housing is more expensive. Housing was always expensive in London. Let's be clear about that. So it wasn't like you go back 25 years and everything was cheap and plentiful in London. You sometimes hear that old chestnut. That's completely not true. London has always been a very expensive place to live. It has always been a place that's been tough to find places to live. I had that many times when I was a young man, out and about, living in London. And for whatever reason, the flat I was living in, like, I had to get out of there for whatever, maybe the landlord was trying to sell the property, or someone was moving out, or whatever. Or I was living with someone who was insane. That was usually more often the case. And I had to find a new place. And yeah, it was a total nightmare. It was awful. So it's always been hard to find places to live in London. But to be fair, I think it is harder now. And I think on top of that, I think that wages haven't really grown with how expensive London is. So basically, the amount of money that people will be making, particularly young people on starter salaries, right? I don't think they've gone up that much in the last 25 years when you compare how much the prices of everything have gone up. I mean, to use the Matt Goodwin, it's £8 a pint. Yes, actually, it's often £8 a pint in London, particularly in central London. And if you go back to sort of, let's say, year 2000, 2001, price of a pint in London was like £3.50. £4 was eye-watering at the time. You would rarely see that. I mean, and you could easily find places that were under £3, even in central London. And God, I mean, getting one under £8. Sometimes you pay more than £8, to be honest with you. I was in Soho a few months ago, and I was doing a thing, and I was recording something with someone. I can't even remember what it was, but anyway, I was in Soho for some reason. And we went out afterwards, and I said, "Oh, I'll get us a couple of pints." This was just at a pub in the middle of the day in Soho, and I asked for 2 pints of, some IPA or something, and it was £17. So, yes, London's got more expensive, and I think more expensive comparatively, as in I think it's more expensive than it was, say, 25 years ago. And that's not a good thing, and it's not a good thing for young people in particular who are trying to find a flat and who are trying to make their money stretch, right? And I sometimes worry about young people in that regard. When I was in my 20s and I was working in London and I wasn't making that much money, it was hard. And I really did have to stretch the pounds at the end of the month to make it. And I now wonder how, with rent being so much more expensive and everything being more expensive, going out, the price of pints, but just the price of everything, the price of food, the price of the basics being so much more comparatively expensive. Yeah, I think I have some sympathy there. I would also say that I think that London hasn't really recovered from COVID fully. And what I mean by that is, pubs shut very early. And it's a vicious negative cycle, because what happens is the pubs close earlier, so they're making less money, and the reason that they're closing is because they think people won't be there, right? They're saying we're just going to shut at 10 because actually we're having less people, and I don't want to be open and have no one here, and that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because basically the pubs start doing this, and then people start going out or staying out less late, and and that just rolls on itself, and then essentially you end up in a situation where I don't know where this ends. The pubs shut at like 8:30 or something, and no one goes out, and that is worrying. I mean, London, an important part of London is the nightlife. An important part of London is that there's so many things to do and so many social choices that are available, and it becoming, that shutting down a bit and becoming less and less. I think that's bad. I mean, it affects me less because I'm a bit older and I have 3 kids and I don't go out that much, frankly. And when I go out, it's probably somewhere very specific because, like I say, I mean, I go out somewhere with friends in London that I know, and probably somewhere local to where I live. So I don't notice it as much as I would if I was 25 and I was working in an office and I was trying to make friends and possibly meet a woman and try and all that jazz, which I don't have anymore, which is quite nice. But anyway, if I was younger, that would be a real issue. And now I'm sort of running out of things that are wrong with London or that are bad about London, or at the very least are worse about London than, say, they were 25 years ago, right? London is pretty much the same as it was, as far as I can tell. London was always a multicultural city. This idea that somehow in the last 25 years it's completely transformed and, oh my God, there's so fewer white people, blah, blah, blah. I mean, even if you cared about that stuff, which I don't particularly, I just don't think that's actually noticeably true. Um, I'm sorry, I don't see it. I don't see London being more ethnically diverse than it was 25 years ago. And I don't mean that in a good way or a bad way. I just think it's kind of nonsense. London was always London is London. You know, London is an international city. It's full of people from everywhere. That was the case 25 years ago. That was the case further back than that. I mean, I haven't quite lived here for 30 years, but first time I came here was almost 30 years ago, and that was definitely the case back 30 years ago. It's got a lot of tourists all year round, particularly in the summer, but year round there's lots of tourists. And actually comparing it to somewhere like New York, I was in New York about almost a year ago. It actually struck me how much more ethnically diverse New York is than New York. Sorry, than London. That would make no sense. Apologies. How much more ethnically diverse New York was than London. And London's pretty ethnically diverse, but New York, totally, that's a different ballgame. And so this complaint that London is being taken over by someone or something, I just have to call it for what it is and say it's bullshit. It just isn't true. I just don't see it. I think there's a lot of fiddling of statistics on this. There's this like British white thing, and who qualifies as British white it's amazing. You you basically have to have a family that goes back to like the Doomsday Book or something. I think to qualify as white British. So yeah, I mean that's just a nonsense look at things anyway. And this all gets a bit reductive and a bit silly because what we're really talking about is the fear of British culture changing in some way that would be negative, which I can understand. I share that. I think that's a reasonable fear. And that we are in some way taking on too much in terms of things like sort of harkening back to my last video, the asylum seekers in the migrant hotels, that we are taking on more than we can really take culturally, and then that's going to have a negative effect on the culture or the negative effect on politics. All that stuff I get, right? But here's the thing. London's doing well. This idea that there are all these no-go zones in London, I mean, can I just tell you as someone who lives here and has lived here for, again, over 25 years, that it's just complete nonsense. Most of London is really nice. Most of London's really lovely. Yes, there are some less than salubrious parts of London. Given how big it is and how spread out it is, it's amazing how few of them there are. Really. I mean, it's amazing how much of London is really, really nice. Okay? Islington, really nice, really lovely. In fact, Islington was a lot rougher 25 years ago. There were still bits of Islington, and there were still pubs in Islington that you'd be like, much less now. You go up to Islington now, it is just really, really gentrified and really, really lovely, if you want the truth. Camden, mostly really lovely. I'm sitting here, I'm tempted to go through every borough in London and tell you, but there's sort of no point because I would just be going, they're all fairly nice. And maybe, in some of them, there are some less nice bits. I mean, Tower Hamlets, frankly, has some less than nice bits. But I'm kind of struggling after that. Some of the bits in East, so Barking and Dagenham, that kind of bit out, that part of the East End, has some less than nice bits. But again, they're pretty rare. They're really, really pretty rare. Almost all of London's really nice. That's just the truth. And actually, coming on to what I really wanted to talk about here, which is why I think the right making a big deal out of London going down the tubes and why London is awful and all the rest of it, is actually they have a better story to tell that fits their narrative, which is this. London's really nice, and London gets everything, and London is full of people who are doing really, really well, and that obscures how poorly a lot of the rest of the country is doing. And in actual fact, they could tell a story about how, again, they sort of do it in a way, but it doesn't really cohere, because they say everybody within the M25 is out of touch, and there are all these posh people who are out of touch, but then they keep going on about how London's a shithole and everybody's doing badly. So it doesn't marry up, and it doesn't make any sense. It'd be much easier to say, like, I don't know, like, film some stuff in Mayfair. Go to Mayfair with a camera and shoot some stuff and say, this is how people live in London. And it's ridiculous, you know. It's all these posh, rich, out of touch people who, you know, blah 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 blah. And again, that in itself is a falsehood, because, like I said, there are actually poor people in London. But I would say even the poor people in London are generally better off than the poor people elsewhere in the country, because generally speaking, you're probably not far from a nice part of town. So you don't have to be. A lot of poor people live somewhere. Let's say they live in a council estate or something. But they live somewhere close to where lots of upper middle class people live, and therefore there'll be nice schools and all the rest of it. You don't have that in a lot of the UK. In fact, the vast majority of it, you don't have that. You know, if you're poor in some post-industrial town in the north of England, I don't know, Rochdale or Rotherham or Burnley, and I feel bad, like now I'm picking on them. I'm not. These are lovely. The people in these places are lovely, and they're amazing, and I've spoken to many people in these towns over the last year and a half in terms of some of the work I've been doing. These people are, they're lovely people. I love speaking to them, but they live in places that are really run down and suffering from huge amount of poverty and a real paucity of employment opportunities and stuff just generally. I mean, there's lots of towns across England where, I mean, and this is at the real bottom end of things, but where everything's shut at night, so no one goes out. You have things where the pubs will close at about 6 because no one goes out at night at all, because they don't have the money to. You essentially have pubs that are open for most part for the real alcoholics who turn up at 11, they drink their faces off, and they're done about 5:30ish, around there. And so, you know, let them wander out. 6 o'clock, you shut. I mean, that's a bad town where that happens, but I've been to a few, and that happens. And again, that's a different order of London pubs shutting at 9 o'clock because they don't, you know, they blah blah blah, and there's too many people being precious about noise and all the rest of it. I mean, that's ridiculous stuff in London, but it's very different than everybody's an alcoholic who's on the dole. I just think if they want to put together this idea of, you know, there's this out of touch elite who don't know what they're talking about, which I think is actually a powerful message, which has, by the way, some truth to it. I mean, you can see it in the way that a lot of the left's commentary are just completely out of touch with what people in the country outside of London think. I just think there's a danger on the right of doing the same thing from the opposite way, of basically being very London-centric themselves and taking a very London-centric view of the world, just a sort of a flip side one, a right-wing one, if that makes sense. And actually, I think you need to see London from outside the M25. You have to see London as a guy from Rochdale, okay, coming down and going, everybody here is doing immensely well. Oh my God, everybody here is living like kings. The streets are paved with gold. I would love to live here. There's no chance I could possibly live here ever. I don't know. I don't even know how I would begin to do it. That's the problem. Not that London is becoming, you know, being forced under Sharia law or I don't know what else. I mean, I don't understand I really don't understand the anti-London stuff. Again, not that I think they should be pro-London necessarily. I'm just saying that their anti-Londonness doesn't make sense. The story that they're telling about London doesn't make sense for what they're trying to achieve. Does that make sense? I don't know if I've been clear here. I've been sort of just thinking aloud and putting this down for you guys. But I think, trying to summarize, I just think if the right want to tell this story about an out-of-touch elite who live in these wonderful, like, you know, they have these wonderful upper middle class lifestyles in London, and therefore they don't understand what people are going through in towns that are broken down, have no jobs, and have a big migrant hotel in the middle of it. Trying to tell a story that actually, no, London's really actually broken down as well and has all these problems and is actually not well off is confusing and weird and doesn't really hang together or make any sense. So anyway, in essence, I'm basically giving advice to Matt Goodwin, which is ridiculous given that he's not going to watch this and is never going to receive this advice. And even if he did, he wouldn't listen to me anyway, and I'm sure he would be convinced that, you know, bashing London somehow is a good idea. Anyway, I think it's silly. And I'm here to tell you, particularly if you're American or you're just not from England, London's lovely. Come to London. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's a great city. It has a lot going for it. The problem with England is that everywhere else is poorer than London. And most places are much, much, much poorer than London. London is one of the richest parts of Europe. Okay? But at the same time, there are parts of England and Wales that are the poorest parts of Europe. The parts of the Welsh valleys are some of the poorest parts of Europe. Some of the parts of the northeast of England, some of the poorest parts of Europe. Right? Problem is London. The problem is that people in London aren't thinking about the rest of the country in the right way. And that includes left-wing, you know, full of themselves idiots who, you know, wave Iranian flags in central London because they don't know what the hell they're doing. And right-wingers like Matt Goodwin who just think that they know what's going on throughout the rest of England. And I'm not really sure that they do. So anyway, I'll leave it on that note. I hope this made sense. If it didn't, apologies. Well, if it didn't, I hope you at least got some entertainment value of it. I mean, I'm assuming that you would have if you watched this far. Anyhow, I'm Nick Tyrone, neoliberal centrist dad. Thank you for joining me. If you like this video, please like it. Subscribe. The subscriber thing helps, even though it, you know, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I'm done. Thanks, guys. Bye.